All right, so let's talk about these concepts of social facilitation, social loafing, and group polarization. So, when we talk about social facilitation, you are being influenced by others, right? So, when we have a person who is considered to be an expert at their craft, and other people are watching them, they actually perform better. So being watched leads to improved performance, right? So athletes like Michael Jordan, when the stage got larger, his performance got better. So that gave a sense of improvement of function. Now, there are times when if a person is not an expert at their craft or it's a really complex task, the presence of others could actually cause damage to performance. So social facilitation only works when it's an easy task or you're a content expert. That's going to improve performance. So a good example is if we were to look at home field advantage in sports, right? And this is an old study from 1992, but it tells the point I'm trying to make, where if we were to look at different sports, uh, the winning percentage of the home team is notably above 50%. And even baseball, where you have the the a large number of games in a season, so it's a larger sample size, it's still 53%. And it goes up with different sports. So when it comes to basketball and soccer, it's over 60%, right? So 64 and 69%. That should tell you, right? So the power of the home team. Now we're dealing with experts in their sports, and we're dealing with an audience behind them. So having an audience behind them actually improves their performance. Now, social loafing is where in a group setting, people perform poorer. Now, social loafing is when individuals are put in a group, they tend to work less hard than when they're working by themselves. So when we pool their work together, they perform not as well. And there was a famous study where they blindfolded people and told them that they were engaging in a tug of war experiment. And they weren't told whether, uh, no, pardon me, I take that back. Some people were told they were pulling alone, and some people were told they're pulling with other people. And the strength by which people pulled on average was stronger than when they were alone than when they were pulling as a group. So we see group contributions or group performance, there are people who slack off. And for many of you, you probably hate group projects because a lot of people will just kick it, and you might have one or two people in the group working really hard, and everyone else, taking advantage of their work. So that's social loafing. Putting people in groups, you lose performance. There is a way to get out of it, though. Uh, if you assign specific tasks to each member of the group so that you can evaluate each individual in the group, that social loafing goes away. But again, social facilitation, improve performance based on being observed or being part of a larger group of people. Social loafing is when put in groups, individual performance tends to decrease when it's not being evaluated. Now, there are also other effects of group interaction. So we have, let's say you had a political debate, right? And you took a person who's very far to the left and very far to the right. And we had them engage in a discussion. And we would ask them to rate their uh, strength of belief in their argument before the discussion, and ask them to rate their strength of belief in the argument after the discussion. What we would find is, after debating a person or discussing a political point with a person, the opinions become more extreme. So the person who's far to the left, their opinions will become more leftist, and the people who are far to the right, it will become more to the right. So that's what we call group polarization. So oftentimes when you debate a person, it's rare that they say, "Oh, you know what? You have a really good point. I changed my mind." Right? It's rare. People tend to, become more entrenched in their position. Now, another issue is what's called groupthink. Now, when you have groupthink, uh, you put a group together to make a decision. You would think that uh, the more minds in the room, the better the decision making would be. However, we see when there is a charismatic leader or general consensus, you're more likely to go with the group. And if we were to look at the invasion of Cuba, the Bay of Pigs situation, Kennedy followed his cabinet, and it was bad advice to invade Cuba. But he followed that because everybody was in consensus. So, good leaders and good teams, you want to seek dissent. You want to seek positions that are opposite of yours to make a better decision. But when there's uniformity, it's easy to get swept away and make bad decisions. So here is another example of group polarization. So if you ask people to rate their prejudice, you have a low prejudice group and a high prejudice group. And then you have some interaction between people who have high prejudice and low prejudice. Their position becomes more extreme. So if we were to look at the difference between the low and high prejudice group before the discussion, it's about 5 points, but it goes to about 6.5 points difference after a discussion. So we're not likely to win someone over if they have an extreme opinion. You're going to make them more entrenched in their position, not the other way around. So there's also the influence of the individual. So everything I've talked to you now is about social control, right? So how large groups of people or the situation influences you. But what about your role? What about your power to affect the group as a whole? Well, we refer to that as your personal control. So you have what's called minority influence. You have the ability to stand out and lead people in a different direction. So there are individuals who can sway a majority. Now, obviously, this is not an exhaustive list, but if you think of Mahatma Gandhi or Dr. King or Princess Diana, these were individuals, but they were able to move millions of people to a particular mindset, to a particular goal. So just because the group has one point of view, that doesn't mean you have to go with it. You can push back, you can sway the group. And a good example on our Supreme Court was Ruth Bader Ginsburg, right? Um, Her famous words are, "I dissent," right? I dissent. And because she disagreed, she had tremendous influence on the court, forcing the court not to just go with a rubber stamp in one way or another. And you too can be that minority influence if you so choose. So let's uh, stop there. Now we'll continue with our lecture, but this is a good place to press pause.